Well, hello and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is show Elevenses number 231. It's Wednesday the 13th of April, and it is a recorded show. So what have we got for you today? Well, some news of Kent travel chaos, which is happening right now and expected to last through Easter and beyond. BP Pulse are investing in EV charging infrastructure improvements here in the UK. The Italian government has also announced a roadmap for their EV charging infrastructure investment. The US authorities are investigating 40 LG batteries, which have caused car fires. Meanwhile, here at home, North York's police road safety campaign would focus on motorcycles. The Wirral has provided a few interesting stats about crashes in poor light. And today's discussion point, I'll be looking at whether or not we should be swapping airbag jackets for bike-mounted airbags. So settle yourselves down for the next 30 minutes or so while I carry on with the show. Now, hopefully the green screen background is working today, at least as I'm recording it. I don't know if it'll work if I'm going out live, but that's something to try another time. Let's start with the first story then. According to reports in the Kent press, the county is actually in the grip of its worst transport chaos for decades, and the problems are set to continue for at least another 3 weeks. Now, the jams have been caused by a perfect storm, really, of problems. A lack of ferries following the recent P&O debacle, Brexit queues, motorway contraflow systems and closures, roadworks, and even upcoming railway works will contribute to the problem. Now, one of the major issues has been the imposition of a single lane working around Brenley Corner roundabout. If you know Kent at all, you probably know Brenley Corner. It's the big roundabout at the end of the M2, where vehicles travelling down towards the Channel ports have to turn right to continue their journey down the A2 towards Dover. Going straight on, the A229, or the A299 actually, carries traffic straight on towards Margate and the Isle of Thanet. Now, this one lane system is causing considerable tailbacks onto the M2, but it's set to remain in place to at least the end of the month. Now, further south, it also appears that the Round Hill Tunnel, which is just beyond the end of the M20, which leads to Folkestone, is also closed coastbound, whilst the A2 Jubilee Way is shut between the A258 and the A20. Now, Operation Brock is also ongoing at the moment, and that is stacking trucks on, of course, the coastbound M20, leaving the other carriageway to carry non-HGV traffic and to operate as a contraflow system. The police, the National Highways, and the KCC have apparently all been asked for some clarity on the time frame for the situation at Brenley Corner, but none have stated when we might expect those roundabouts to be removed. And just to ensure everybody suffers equally, Network Rail will be carrying out significant engineering work over the weekend on the line between Tunbridge Wells and Paddock Wells in West Kent. That'll be over the Easter weekend, and on Sunday there will be no trains from Lewisham or on the Bexley Heath line. And buses will be replacing trains between Rochester and Rainham. So if you are planning on an Easter weekend visit to the Garden County of England, or even the jaunt abroad via the Channel ports or the tunnel, you might actually have to be worth rethinking your destinations there. Now, don't forget, you are watching 11s with Kevin Williams here of Survival Skills. This is a recorded show, so if you do answer or ask a question, if you do make a comment, I can't get back to you straight away. I will try and come back to it at a later date, however. Right, on March 25th of this year, the UK government announced plans to create 300,000 public electric vehicle charging points by 2030. That's just under 8 years' time. It plans to invest 1.6 billion in this effort that through the electric vehicle infrastructure strategy plan. Now, in addition to the UK's own plans and funding, petroleum offshoot BP Pulse, which is spelled with all small letters, by the way, no capitals, took the opportunity to announce it will be spending an additional 1 billion on its own EV infrastructure plans, and their investment will see BP Pulse triple the volume of their UK network's public charging access points. They will also be upgrading the EV charging infrastructure right across their network with the aim of improving reliability and providing high-speed charging. The what they'll be putting in place includes high-speed charging hubs, home charging services, and enhancements to their existing digital technology. Rollout will be over the next decade, and the company confidently expects the development to create hundreds of new jobs in the UK. BP Pulse is the UK's largest public charging network, and they currently have just over 7,000 EV charging points across the country. Now, don't forget, you can catch the show on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11. It is normally a live show today, and for the next couple of shows, it will be going out pre-recorded. So what else is going on? Well, it's all electric today, the news. The Italian government is allocating 650 million euros. That's 2/3 of a billion, isn't it? And that will be annually for 2022, 2023, and 2024. So that's a significant investment, and compare that with the UK's plan, which, if you remember, was 1.6 billion, but spread over 8 years. The Italians seem to be taking it rather more seriously than we do. And these will be to incentivize the purchase of electrified and low emission vehicles. So that's electrics, hybrids, and low emission cars, and also motorcycles. The fund comes from the government. It's part of the automotive fund. There's a total budget of 8.7 billion euros until 2030, apparently. And Italy has decided to phase out the internal combustion engine in line with other European countries. And they announced that there will be a total ban on new ICE cars from 2035. For light commercial vehicles, it will be 5 years later in 2040. But the incentives will be for the purchase of electric and hybrid light vehicles, such as motorbikes and motorcycles. And you get a subsidy of 30% up to a purchase price. You get a subsidy of 30% of the purchase price up to a maximum of €3,000, or 40% of the purchase price up to a maximum of €4,000 if you scrap a vehicle of emission class 3 or worse at the same time. So I dare say there will be a hot trade in old motorcycles, which can be scrapped to get your money's worth from the grant there. But not all is rosy in the world of EVs. The US Federal Highway and Vehicle Safety Administration is moving to investigate LG Energy. They have been providing faulty battery cells, and they've led to fires in electric cars and plug-in hybrids. The National Highway Transport Traffic Safety Administration, the NHTSA, they want to ensure that all the defective batteries have actually been recalled by car manufacturers. The review affects 138,324 vehicles in total, according to a report by Reuters news agency. The Auto Agency Safety Agency will contact LG and other companies that may have purchased the same or similar devices from LG. It said the faulty battery cells most likely came from two of the battery makers' Asian plants, specifically one in Korea and one in China. The spokesman for LG Energy Solution said the company would fully cooperate in the endeavour. The recalls at General Motors for their Chevrolet Bolt EV prompted the US manufacturer to halt sales and distribution of that product in August. By September, they just said that the battery problems had been fixed, but the recall has apparently cost General Motors around $2 billion. And in October, General Motors said it has actually reached an agreement with LG for billions in compensation. Other affected firms include Mercedes-Benz, Chrysler's parent Stellantis, and Hyundai Motor, and they've all issued it recalls for internal defects in high voltage batteries that pose a fire risk. Okay, so don't forget, if you do enjoy the show, do pop over to my coffee page. If you buy me a cuppa over there, then you'll get access to around 800 articles, and more are going up all the time from my Facebook archive. And if you subscribe over there, you'll get access to more specialist information too. So do pop over and see what I'm doing at coffee. I don't think you will be disappointed. Right, okay, moving on quickly. Although I tend to treat claims from industry bodies with some caution, I can't help but think that what the Asphalt Industry Association is saying, that's the organisation representing the people who lay our roads, when they state that local authority highway teams have a legal responsibility to keep our roads safe, but do not have the funds to do so in a cost-effective, productive way. I think what they're saying there is almost certainly true. Now, the AIA commission an annual survey of highways departments in all the local authorities, England and Wales, and they tried to use this to build a picture of local roads and their condition. And their latest survey, which happens to be called the Annual Local Authority Road Maintenance Survey, or ALARM for short, opposite really, published last month, saw a record 73% of local authorities responding, and that could in itself be quite interesting when you hear what the state of play is. Although the government has made much of the increased budgets for fixing potholes, and despite a 4% increase in the average highway maintenance budget, the proportion being invested on carriageways itself is down, and local authorities would have needed an extra 1 billion last year just to reach their own targets for regular road maintenance. That's even before you start to consider the long backlog of necessary repairs. So as a result of this, the estimated one-time cost to fix local roads in England and Wales has increased by almost a quarter on last year's figure. It now stands at 12.64 billion, or 60,000 pounds per mile of road. The percentage of roads reported as being in poor overall condition, in other words, roads that will need maintenance almost certainly in the next 12 months, rose from 2% to 11%. And almost 1 in 5 of local roads is likely to need to be rebuilt in the next 5 years. Yet, at the current rate, roads are only being reconstructed at once every 70 years. So we can see what things are well adrift of keeping up to date with road repairs. Rick Green, who is the AIA chair, he said, local authority highway teams have legal responsibility. I've just read that bit out, haven't I? Anyway, the conclusion for PTW riders is that things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. Years ago, I was chatting to my brother as we were driving up a little country lane, and he wondered why the council actually bothered to tarmac that particular road, since it only led to a couple of cottages. And I suspect a lot of councils will be having that kind of quiet conversation right now. Okay, now if you are out and about on the bike over the Easter break, do be aware that as it's a very popular time for riding, there are plenty of police initiatives which will claim to be making our roads safer. And one of these is in North Yorkshire, where you will need to look out for Operation Boundary, where the North Yorks Police dedicated road safety operation will focus on, wait for it, motorcyclists. And the statement explains that since motorcycle crashes account for 21% of all fatal collisions in the North Yorkshire area in 2021, it's a county-wide concern, and so the police will be, quote, patrolling the roads popular with motorcyclists over the coming weeks and months. Now, according to the press release, officers will be speaking to people across the county in the coming weeks to educate them about road safety, vehicle safety, and the law. And police roads policing inspector Mick Roth said Operation Boundary is about showing people what is and what is not acceptable on our roads, and the behaviour of those who risk the lives of themselves or others on our roads is not acceptable. April's usually a time when we see an increase in motorcyclists across our road network due to the warmer weather and Easter holidays, so we will be visible across the county to make sure all road users travel as safely as possible. Now, with that veiled threat in mind, it's hard to see how the police also could expect riders to take advantage of what they call an opportunity to ask questions and seek advice. Personally, I think they might do better spending their time flagging up potholes. Anyway, there's another safety campaign encouraging road users in the Wirral, however they choose to get from A to B, to make themselves as visible as possible and to look out for each other. Now, the Wirral Council campaign stresses that being able to be seen and actively seeking out other road users is one of the easiest ways to avoid being involved in a collision. And they actually produced some interesting statistics actually this time. They showed that of the 2,000 casualties from collisions that occurred on the Wirral's roads, 90% happened on roads with a speed limit of below 40 miles per hour. And that of that total, 40% of the injuries actually occurred when light conditions were poor. And so it's not surprising that Wirral Council and its partners are offering free high visibility kits to the first 500 people who complete a form on their road safety website. 100 kits are apparently available to each of 5 different user groups, which presumably will include motorcyclists. I haven't actually checked. The kits will include an item to increase visibility, so presumably that'll be your standard high-vis vest, and some further information on how to keep safe on the road. Now, as I explain in Science of Being Seen, they're using light colours in poor lighting conditions does make a lot of sense. But don't fall into the common trap of thinking that just because you've got your high vis on, everybody else will see you. They won't. Right, now just before I get on to the final topic of the day, which is the item about airbags, I'll just take a quick moment to remind you about the Survival Skills mini ride out, which is coming up. Now, this will be on Saturday, the 23rd of April. I keep putting the 3rd of April up in the bump. It's the 23rd. It hasn't gone yet. Saturday, 23rd of April, 10 o'clock. It's free. I'm not charging anything for these. It is pre-book only, though, because I'm only taking a limited number and I don't want a dozen people turning up with all their mates appearing as we go along. And April's ride will be a nice one from St Albans out along some nice roads across the Chilterns. So those are pre-book, and you can book those on my events page. The link is in the information on this item. Right, so on to the final discussion point today. As I say, a bit of a quick fire show because I'm recording these prior to me taking a little bit of a trip to Scotland. Over the last decade or so, airbag vests have become a popular item of rider clothing, and either worn as a vest to wear over the top of your kit already, or built into branded clothing as a bit of an added value item. Now, there are quite a few makes to choose from. I can think off the top of my head of Alpine Star's Dainese and Helite, and I'm sure there are others. And just recently, there have also been attempts to produce airbag trousers. Now, it's not surprisingly, really, when you think about it, the worries that people have about back injuries, neck injuries, and also to lower limbs. But I have to say that given that 2 of the more serious injuries that riders suffer are actually to the pelvis from hitting the petrol tank, and the femur, which is the thigh bone, from hitting the handlebars of the bike itself, makes me wonder whether we're not actually going somewhat in the wrong direction with airbag jackets, and whether or not we shouldn't be thinking about mounting airbag safety solutions on motorcycles. Now, I had a quick look, and it seems that bike-mounted airbags were under test in the UK as far back as the mid-1970s, presumably by the Transport and Road Research Laboratory, which of course is the home of the infamous leg protectors. But when a airbag was finally fitted to a motorcycle, it was actually to Honda's Goldwing in 2006. So fairly astonishingly, that was 16 years ago. And this was the first motorcycle to incorporate such a safety device. It was designed to deploy in a severe head-on crash, and the idea was to stop the rider flipping off the bike. But critics naturally said that the installation was bulky and heavy. And to be fair, they have a point. In the cockpit of a standard sort of four-wheel vehicle, multiple airbags can be concealed in the steering wheel, the dash panel, the side pillars, with the consequent impact on view, of course, and even in seats. And the weight penalty is barely noticeable. But perhaps oddly, motorcycles have actually been seen as lacking the space to put these airbags in. Now, that may be partially true for naked bikes, but a quick glance at my XJ6 shows that there are huge empty spaces behind the headlight and down the sides of the fairing that could easily mount some sort of pocket-sized balloons. So why that may be, I'm not entirely sure. That the Goldwing remains the sole operating production system for an airbag. I don't know if there are any others. I've not found any, but that may all be about to change. Now have a quick look at the next picture. Let me just get that a bit bigger so you can see what you're looking at, and there it is. Now that is a diagram from a Honda patent that they registered back in January in 2020. So a bit before these shows started, which is why I didn't remember mentioning it before. The system works like other airbags. Basically, the impact causes a compressed gas canister to fire and inflates the airbag. But the whole system appears very compact compared with the Goldwing setup, and it also seems to offer far more limited protective coverage. It just seems to pop up vertically in front of the rider. So now I know that there are plenty of valid questions about the time taken for airbags to inflate. Critics say that you're already hitting the tank of the motorcycle, for example, before the airbag pops up. And the same questions can actually be asked of airbag jackets, incidentally, particularly the lanyard operated ones. Airbags mounted on bikes have the designs I've seen have tried to cocoon riders, but which isn't easy. But it may be that looking to design an airbag which will work with a sort of really high performance and address high speed, high energy collisions is actually the wrong way to go, because most motorcycle crashes, be they tail enders or right-of-way violations where the car turns across the rider's path, they happen at relatively low speed in urban environments, and they are mostly already survivable. Relatively few riders are actually killed in these crashes. So having even a modest airbag popping up in front of the rider could tip the balance. It could perhaps turn a severe injury into a minor injury. It could prevent a death and maybe only a severe injury. I say only, but any gain is worth having. Now the patent graphic shows the compact device attached to the a scooter like vehicle just behind the headstock. But if you look at a lot of modern motorcycle design, you'll find those rather unpleasant bug-eyed headlights, which are all kind of faired into a little nacelle. So I'm sure a modern naked could also find a place to put an airbag. And it turns out that Honda aren't the only ones looking backwards for future developments in this field either. Take a look at this one. Oops, that's the same one. Let's move on to the next picture. There it is. Now, that's a rather better graphic. And that is an airbag, and it seems to be very similar to the Honda one, you'll notice. And this one is being produced by Autoliv Inc., who are billed as a world leader in automotive safety systems, and they've actually teamed up with Piaggio, um, who, as you probably know, are a leading manufacturer of scooters and motorcycles, and they're collaborating to design airbags which they hope will provide greater protection for the two-wheeled riders. Now, Autoliv have used what they call advanced simulation tools to work out the initial design and the sort of the performance concepts, and they've also conducted full-scale crash tests of a working airbag. Um, their link with Piaggio will, of course, allow them to go forward to developing something that will work with a production vehicle and be commercial. Now, as I said, it's interesting that the two systems look so similar, but I suspect that the reason for that is similar design goals. Now, when the original Goldwing on the system first appeared, as I said, I remember a lot of riders were laughing at the complexity and the weight penalty of the airbag, saying it would make riding a motorcycle a mockery. Now, much the same, of course, has been said about many other safety systems. It was certainly said about ABS, for example, although motorcyclists actually took fairly rapidly to traction control, probably because it was seen as a performance aid. But ironically, the push towards wearable airbags came from the very sport that works hard to minimize the all-up weight of my motorcycle racing. Now, given that relatively few riders around the globe actually really want to dress up in close-fitting and relatively bulky clothing, particularly if you live in a hot climate or you're riding at relatively low speeds, doing short journeys in urban areas, maybe it's time to stop taking the mickey out of the Goldwing and actually start asking if there isn't a real role for bike-mounted rider protection systems like this one. Now, the big advantage to me is that the airbag is always there. There's no decision about whether to put it on or not because I'm just nipping to the shops or it's pretty hot out there today. The rider is always going to be sitting behind the device. And I think that's particularly important for small commuter style machines where many riders simply don't want the hassle of clobbering up in vast quantities of riding kit before they do what they think of as a short ride. Nevertheless, it is worth remembering that Piaggio do build things other than Piaggios and Vespa scooters. They also own the Aprilia and Moto Guzzi brands. Aprilia in particular have a background in motorsport. They are seen as a fairly sporting motorcycle brand. So maybe this is actually the opportunity to kickstart the industry back into airbags mounted on the bike itself, particularly at a time when we're moving to an electric future, which means that the conventional sort of fuel on top of the tank design of a motorcycle can be rethought. With the Zeros, for example, there is a storage space on top of the tank that could theoretically be used to house an airbag. And one other point, remember the fractured femur articles that I talked about when right at the top of this piece. Last year, Autoliv actually filed another motorcycle safety related patent. And this time it was for breakaway handlebars. And the idea of those is that they protect against precisely that injury. Basically, the handlebars are weaker than your thighs. So when you are thrown forward on the bike, it'll be the handlebar that folds up and not your leg in a frontal collision. So I actually believe that taking safety in this direction, making the crash safer by making the bike less dangerous to the rider, is a very, very sensible place to be going. Right, that is it for today. A bit of a quick fire show. The next one will also be recorded. So I will see you again in a few days' time. Meanwhile, thanks for looking in. If you are out there on your bikes today, enjoy your riding, but do stay shiny side up.